Recording in progress. Okay, we're good to go. Hello, Vince, coming in. Lovely to see you from the Philippines. So, George.
Okay, uh, this is a course in the Institute for the Study of Free Religion. Uh, we are beginning both in uh, Europe with Andrew and in Japan with Reverend Maruta, who is with us. These courses are to help our members study creative, liberating religion, both religion, freedom of religion, and freedom within religions. Tonight, here in Arizona and your mornings in elsewhere in the world, uh, Reverend Andrew James Brown, minister of Cambridge Unitarian Church, will lead us in the second session of our study of jiyu, free religion, and its dual nature for the individual and within a free fellowship, church, or community. Andrew, the time is yours.
Lovely. Thank you very much, George. Right, there's quite a lot to get through when I realized when I was preparing this one. So what I think I'll do is do it in two chunks. We'll do the first section, and if there are any immediate questions coming from that, that'll mostly be historic, looking at two early essays. And then we'll get some questions if there's anything that you want to be sort of surer about or know something more about. And then I'll go on to the second part. As with last sessions, the last session, I hope there'll be lots of opportunity for us to be talking with each other, because the way I've tried to present this is in a fashion to start an ongoing conversation about what is free religion and how it might actually be played out in real living communities today. So, to set the scene for these essays about Kyetsu Kyokai, which I'll come to what it means, this actual free religious community of Imaoka Shinichiro's, Imaoka Sensei, I think it's important to take a look at the principles of living that we looked at last week. The reason for doing this is that it helps us understand what the jiyu, the free religion, or a creative, free and liberating spirituality, was that was trying to be practiced in Kyetsu Kyokai. So we'll just start by looking at that. I'll share the page for you. So we looked at this week last month, and these principles of living, which were revised in August 1973 after an initial version came, he produced an original version in 1965. These were read out each week in the Kyetsu Kyokai, his community. So I'm just going to read through them so we have them in our heads as we go forwards. One, I place trust and have faith in myself. Some of us talked about this last week, that it's rather than I believe, it could be translated as believe, is to use place trust in or have faith in. So I have trust or have faith in myself. I become aware of my own subjectivity and creativity and feel the worth of living in life. Subjectivity and creativity. In later years, he added sociality. Can also be expressed as personality, divinity, and Buddha nature. 2, I place trust or have faith in my neighbor. A neighbor is oneself as a neighbor. If I place trust or have faith in myself, I inevitably have faith in my neighbor. 3, I place trust, have faith in a cooperative society. both oneself and a neighbor, while each possessing a unique personality, are not things that exist in isolation. Because of this uniqueness, a true interdependence, true solidarity, and true human love are established, and therein a cooperative society is realized. 4. I place trust, have faith in the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society. The self, neighbor, and cooperative society, while each having a unique personality, are entirely one. Therefore, there's no differentiation of precedence or of superiority or inferiority between them. One always contains the other. 5. I place trust, have faith in the unity of life and nature. Life, which consists of the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society, further unites and merges with all of existence, heaven, earth, and all things. 6. I place trust, have faith in the church. The church, this is kyokai, that's the word, is the prototype or archetype and motivating power of the cooperative society. I can only be myself by being a member of the church, the kyokai. 7. I place trust, have faith in a specific religion. In other words, I am a member of the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. That's often translated as Unitarian Church, but it's actually more accurate to translate it as something like returning to one fellowship. I'll come back to that. However, a specific religion, including the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, neither monopolizes religious truth, nor is it the ultimate embodiment of it. And then finally, I place trust, have faith in free religion, jiyu. While having faith in a specific religion, the endless pursuit and improvement towards universal and ultimate truth is the core of religious life. Such a dynamic religion is called free religion, jiyu. And you may remember from last month that jiyu I'm also translating in a much more discursive way as a creative, inquiring, free and liberative spirituality or religion. So when you hear the term free religion, try and keep all of those in play: creative, inquiring, free and liberative. Okay. So now we have that in place, let's begin to explore his post-1948 community, founded in 1948 in Tokyo. It was called the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, and as I've mentioned, it's often translated into English as the Tokyo Unitarian Church, but better translated as the Tokyo Returning to One Fellowship. Now, for Japanese speakers, I know we have one here, but it might help even English speakers to see this. It's worth making clear that the kyo of Kietsu Kyokai was always and only jiyu the kyo, the free religion. So in other English words, the teaching of the Returning to One Fellowship was always and only free religion. Creative, inquiring, free and liberative religion and spirituality. Let me share the characters, and that might help, just so you can see them. The top one is jiyu, the free religion. So the first two characters together is free and liberative. And then shukyo, so you can see the kyo at the end, which is kind of like the teaching. Shu is the denomination or sect or church. The kyo is the teaching. And here's Kietsu Kyokai, the returning to one, Kietsu. And there's its kyo, its teaching Kyokai in its little house, its room, its meeting. So you can see that jiyu is the kyo of Kietsu Kyokai. So it's important to see those two terms being held quite closely together. So we've looked at the principles of living, but it's worth reminding you that Imaoka Sensei thought very early on that any free religious community needed some kind of minimal charter, Koryo, he called it, which could stand for them not as a creed, but simply as a set of foundational practical guiding principles and as a statement of the community's unity and shared purpose. So that's why we began with that. So with that in place, let me now walk you through a few of the key ideas found in 4 essays in which he outlines his developing ideas about Kiitsu Kyokai. The first is from 1950, the second from 1959. We'll probably take a break at that point. And then the third is from 1979 and the last from 1980, so much further into his life, close to his death in 1988. So the first essay, and you do have this in your, if you've downloaded the notes, although I have a revised set of translations which I'll share with you at the end of this meeting. The first essay from 1950, written only 2 years after the community was founded, is called The Purpose of Kiitsu Kyokai. And Imaoka Sensei begins by stating explicitly that at this early stage in the community's life, there were still many aspects which remained unclear to him. Now, this fact, I think, is very important. We can gloss over it rather quickly. But I think it's important to note because it reveals that Imaoka Sensei's free religious project was not one which started with some predetermined ideological blueprint in mind, but was one which was emerging from out of his own lived experience and the small community he gathered round him in Tokyo. And I think it's an indication that free religion is at heart, in Imaoka Sensei's mind, always already a living, dynamic, creative process from which no one, nor any community, can ever finally graduate into some final, fixed and stable, or completely stable form. However, although there's no initial fixed blueprint in play, Imaoka Sensei makes it clear that Kiitsu Kyokai did not emerge from a vacuum, but out of the distinctively Japanese Unitarian movement that flourished between the 1880s and the 1920s. Imaoka Sensei thought that because of this, the post-war Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai could be considered a continuation of the Japanese Unitarian movement, as well as a continuation of the earlier Kiitsu Kyokai with which he was involved, namely the important secular interfaith study and discussion group called the Association Concordia, which was founded in 1913 by his teacher, Anosaki Masaharu, Narusa Jinzo, and it was under the patronage of key figures in the Japanese financial and business world, Shibusawa Aichi and Moriyama Ichizaemon. Now, again, I think this is quite helpful to see, even for non-Japanese readers, is to see the different Kiitsu Kyokais. We have the 3 that Imaoka used. Kiitsu in all cases means returning to one. Okay, the first 2 characters are the same. But notice this first one, Kiitsu Kyokai. This was the Association Concordia, this secular organization. And these 2 characters together are used regularly in Japanese for all kinds of secular institutions, like the Japanese Rugby Association or NHK, the Japanese TV company. They use this Kyokai. The K at the end is Kyokai. So just notice that. It's kind of like an association of associations. But Imaoka Sensei wanted his new, as you'll hear, his new Kiitsu Kyokai to be a religious group rather than a secular interfaith group. And that's why he replaced this kanji for kyo with this one, which really does mean the sort of religious teaching in its meeting. So that's why. So it says the same, Kiitsu Kyokai, so there's a name connection, but this one here is clearly a religious organization where this one is not. And just so you know, I'm not going to go into that here. It's important but obscure. This kyokai here in the middle, which is what's printed in all the books, generally means in Japanese church, and a Christian church at that. Not exclusively, but generally. So Imaoka Sensei decided on his notice board to use this last one, where he replaced the modernized kai, the little meeting, with an old kanji. The problem was many modern Japanese readers didn't know how to read this, so it kind of defaults back to church. Okay. So Kietsu Kyokai is a religious meeting. But despite this connection with the early Unitarian tradition, Imaoka Sensei immediately adds, quote, however, I thought that a mere revival, that is, a mere reproduction of the old Unitarian Church, would be meaningless. Instead, I sought to establish the new Kietsu Kyokai as a continuation of the former Unitarian Church, but one that had undergone a profound transformation. In other words, I believed that the new Kietsu Kyokai should be something more than just another Christian denomination. To put it another way, it asserts a free, pure, non-denominational religion that is non-sectarian, which goes beyond denominational bounds and takes a step further than just being liberal or free Christianity, opposed or in contrast to Orthodox Christianity, unquote. Imaoka Sensei is well aware that this attempt to move beyond denominations, what he calls choshua or transdenominationalism, could easily make it appear that the religion of Kietsu Kyokai, i.e. Jiyu Shukyo, this free religion, that the religion of Kietsu Kyokai was something abstract, idealistic, and without any real substance. So he quickly adds that from the point of view of Kietsu Kyokai, because Jiyu Shukyo, free religion, couldn't ever be something ready-made, but was only something made to order by a community, by an individual. What actually came into being was a faith that was the most personal, real, and tangible kind that could be imagined, one that was truly able to respond to a person's current needs. Despite this, Imaoka Sensei fully accepts and always accepted that if the religion that best suited someone's personal needs happened to be Buddhism, then naturally that person will become a Buddhist. If it happened to be Christian, then naturally they will become a Christian. Nevertheless, he immediately goes on to say this, quote, however, there are many people in the world who cannot find fulfillment in ready-made established religions. Ultimately, our advocacy of trans-denominationalism is not about rejecting established religions, but rather stems solely from the desire to remain true to our own genuine needs with no ulterior motive. In other words, it's the same as when Shinran Shonin, the important first figure in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, it's the same as when Shinran Shonin said that Amida's vow is for me alone, unquote. Imaoka Sensei then turns his attention in this early essay to the concern that it's going to be impossible to form a meaningful religious community out of such a diverse group of individuals with their own made-to-order faiths. But Imaoka Sensei thinks this worry is groundless because he insists that any true cooperative community can only be organized by the gathering of individuals with distinct personalities and characters, and that a true religion, a true kyokai, a true community, true church, can only be organized by those who truly possess a personal and autonomous faith. He sees them really bound together. But this point allows him to state that although Kietsu Kyokai is concerned to embody a trans-denominationalist attitude, in the end, it cannot in itself absolutely transcend all denominations. And so Imaoka Sensei goes on to say that, quote, strictly speaking, we end up forming a new denomination that is itself trans-denominational. However, the nature of this denomination certainly differs greatly from the usual sense of the word denomination. Unquote. One obvious but vitally important consequence of the creation of such a church is, of course, that it must be organized democratically and in as non-hierarchical way as possible. So the Kiitsu Kyokai always advocated for congregationalism and lay personism. It's a rather clunky translation, but you know what I'm talking about. Another consequence of this is that in the Kiitsu Kyokai, Imaoka Sensei insists that worship, preaching, and teaching was to be entrusted to willing members of the congregation. And it was understood that the church, the Kyokai, did not belong to the minister, nor to any other religious professional, but only to its members. In this sense, Imaoka Sensei thought there was a sort of structural relationship to the Quaker style of meeting. A further consequence of the way Kiitsu Kyokai attempted to hold together, remember, hold together binding, that's where we get the word religio from, religion. But a further consequence of this way of holding together free religious individuals in a free religious community was that a central element of its teaching from very early on, this is 1950, was the belief that salvation, suku, is both personal and social at the same time. Think of the principles. An individual sees themselves in the other sees themselves in this, and then the cooperative community. So salvation is personal and social at the same time. Please understand that in this free religious context, salvation is understood simply to mean something like deliverance from harm or suffering. It's a very Buddhist influenced way of understanding it, through a process of returning to oneness, kietsu, in community, kyokai. So that's central to Imaoka's understanding of kietsu kyokai. Interestingly, an example of this community understanding of salvation, one of them is drawn from Shin Buddhism, the religion of his childhood, and he points to the example of Hozo Bosatsu, that's the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, Amida in his causal stage, the Amida Buddha. But also he points to the example of the community church movement in the United States, which was initiated by Dr. John Haynes Holmes. So we have that dual illustration from two very different traditions. Or are they different? The 1950 essay begins to draw to a close with Imaoka Sensei noting that because of the early Japanese Unitarian movement's important work, both as an intellectual Enlightenment movement and as an advocate for progressive social and political change, in his opinion, one of its historic weaknesses was that it had become too intellectual and somewhat lost its character as a living religious spiritual community. That go back to how I was showing you the different kyokais. The first Unitarian, the Kiitsu Kyokai, that was an interfaith group which had its connections to the Japanese Unitarian movement. That was a secular institution, but his Kiitsu Kyokai is a religious kyokai. So he really is concerned to make the new post-war Kiitsu Kyokai religious institution. And he was insistent that it mustn't become merely a forum for intellectual or indeed political debate, but a church, a kyokai, that was a microcosm of the ideal society, one which must embrace, quote, scholars and the uneducated, business people, laborers, civil servants, students, men, women, the elderly, and the young, unquote. So that's the 1950 essay. Now we move to 1959 and an essay entitled, What Kind of Church is Kiitsu Kyokai? So what's happened in the 9 years since writing his first piece about this? Well, the first thing to observe is that Kietsu Kyokai is clearly still an evolving project. So much so that he admits he's not even clear whether there exist members or whether there were those who could call themselves followers of Jiyu Shukyo, of Kietsu Kyokai. Additionally, Imaoka Sensei tells us that although the church, the Kyokai, continues to meet each Sunday, he feels that, quote, it has not been very successful. And it is a common opinion that the church will probably disappear in time, unquote. To this, he adds, as the person responsible for starting the Kietsu Kyokai, he feels, quote, sincerely sorry for this situation, unquote. Now, to better help understand Imaoka Sensei's downbeat note at this point in time, 1959, it helps to know that many of the other new religious groups in Japan which emerged, as did the Unitarians, during the Meiji and Taisho periods, so between 1868 and 1926, and with whom he had considerable contact, were by now growing considerably in both size and influence. Perhaps the most well-known example of this, at least in our own liberal religious circles, liberal free religious circles, was, of course, Rishikoshi Kai, which by 1959 was large and wealthy enough to have begun work on its great sacred hall, whereas Kietsu Kyokai was still meeting in the very modest hall owned by the Saisoku Academy, i.e. the school where Imaoka Sensei was principal between 1925 and 1960, before becoming chair of the board, and then again principal from 1969 to 73. In fact, as we will discover in the second part of this little introduction, Kietsu Kyokai continued to meet in the same modest hall until its final days, shortly after Imaoka Sensei's death in 1988. However, Imaoka immediately qualifies this downbeat statement by noting something he always thought was vital in the development of a free religion or free religious community, namely the need to examine the character and essence of the free religion that Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai advocated. Throughout his mature years, so really from his 30s onwards I'm thinking about here, he felt that free religion, jiyu shukyo, by its very nature was always going to be something of an experimental religion. And he makes it clear that the past 10 years had assuredly been, quote, a period of experimentation for the church, unquote. Despite this sort of sense of not knowing what Kietsu Kyokai was, still had this feeling. Despite this, Imaoka Sensei freely admits he doesn't think he's yet fully grasped the core of free religion, and he still sees himself as nothing more than a seeker on the path, and certainly not, in a rather charming turn of phrase, and certainly not, quote, a shepherd guiding a flock of lost sheep, unquote. He didn't see himself as some sort of great leader with all the answers. But by 1959, he does think he's reached a point where he's able to put his experiments into practice while still experimenting. Wholly consistent with the contents of the first essay, Imaoka Sensei remains clear that free religion, jiyu shukyo, is a religion that thoroughly emphasizes freedom and refuses to be bound by fixed dogmas. But by now this insight has deepened and broadened, allowing him to state that he felt free religion and any church or kyokai like Kietsu Kyokai that sought to practice it was also liberated both from founders, so Kietsu Kyokai Jiyu Shukyo has no founders, and the idea that it's going to reach a final destination where all creative movement and change was going to cease. He's now clear that because Kietsu Kyokai is a community which emphasizes freedom, autonomy, and creativity, you heard that, in the principles and values the process and progress and development above all else, it can no longer meaningfully be understood or understand itself as a species of so-called Buddhism or so-called Christianity, or indeed of any so-called ism, even Unitarianism, that Unitarianism that comes into Japan from Britain and America in the 1880s. Related to this insight, Imaoka Sensei explicitly states that he feels great religious teachers like Jesus and Shakyamuni were never concerned to teach specific fixed doctrines or encourage certain fixed practices, and by extension, establish Christian or Buddhist religion. But instead, in the case of Jesus, the teaching was about, quote, the gospel of creative love, unquote. And in the case of Shakyamuni, the teaching was about, quote, the fundamental principle of creative evolution, which manifests itself in infinitely adaptive and freeing ways. Imaoka Sensei, liberative ways, we can say that as well. Imaoka Sensei then states he believes, quote, this Dharma, so he thinks this is a Dharma, a teaching, can even be interpreted as humanism, and that this kind of non-dogmatic, highly flexible religion is precisely the free religion that Kyetsu Kyokai upholds, unquote. For Imaoka Sensei, this means that because, quote, later Christians and Buddhists can find the ever-evolving spiritual life within the boundaries of dogma, ritual, and religious authority, an essential task of the Tokyo Kyetsu Kyokai was to help return these ossified, formalized, established religions to their original sources and revive them with free and creative life. In other words, to transform Orthodox Christianity and fixed Buddhism into free Christianity and free Buddhism, unquote. So that's one important, that's, I suppose, an ecumenical aspect of Kyetsu Kyokai. It's not trying to convert people to itself, but to work with these denominations in order to help return them or get them to focus back on their sources and transform into a free Christianity, free Buddhism, and so on and so forth. But then Imaoka Sensei immediately and importantly adds this, quote, however, if free Christianity and free Buddhism are fully to embody true freedom, then there is no need to cling to traditional labels such as Christianity and Buddhism. It would be sufficient simply to call it free religion, jiyu. Thus, through our Kyetsu Kyokai, we have sought to create a thoroughgoing example of free religion. Okay. This meant, as far as Imaoka Sensei was concerned, in the Tokyo Kyetsu Kyokai, they wanted to learn from all religious and spiritual teachers and traditions across generations and geography. But, this is an important point, for Imaoka Sensei, this was never something that should be an uncritical, willy-nilly pick and mix process. And he makes it absolutely clear that he did not think that, quote, all religions are unconditionally unified, unquote, and stressed that, quote, noise and harmony must be distinguished. So there's a critical process. Imaoka Sensei then tells us, quote, for different religions to truly converge, they must refine one another. So it's a process of refining through conversation and meeting. Thus, all religions must first become free religions. That is to say, doctrines, rituals, and religious institutions within various religions should not be regarded as ultimate or absolute, but rather as secondary and symbolic, shaped by the conditions of time and environment. The essential task of free religion is to awaken to what lies behind these dogmas and symbols, unquote. The 1959 essay then ends, and then we'll take a break with this last bit. So if you've got any questions about this first bit, we can run through those, and then I'll carry on with the later essays. So the 1959 essay then ends with an important paragraph that I think is worth quoting in full. I shall find it for you so you can read along. What you've got here is what kind of church is Kietsu Kyokai. You can see that down there. And I'm going to the last. So just so you can see, that was published in Creation, which was a magazine in 1959. These texts are the ones I'll happily share a PDF with you at the end. If you remind me, please remind me. So here we are. I'll highlight the paragraph. I often hear critical remarks that the Kietsu Kyokai lacks creeds and scriptures, pastors and priests, making it too vague and difficult to grasp. And indeed, such a criticism is perfectly reasonable. However, since the essence of religion lies in grasping the great life of free and selfless creative evolution, that's Bergson. That is so Henri Bergson. Maybe we can talk about that. However, since the essence of religion lies in grasping the great life of free and self-creative evolution, such matters are simply peripheral details. That being said, just because they are peripheral does not mean they are entirely unnecessary. So at some point, our church should also establish these elements, indicating that it hasn't. We'll come to that. Yeah, it hasn't yet established them. From the standpoint of the Kietsu Kyokai, a faith that is free, tolerant, universal, and all-embracing, the Buddhist scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, and even the Kietsu Kyokai's own sacred texts must all be regarded as equally sacred. What were Kietsu Kyokai's sacred texts? He doesn't say, but I think he's thinking of Emerson. Particularly, there'll be others, but Ralph Waldo Emerson, John Haynes Holmes, the community church leader, and possibly Bergson, which he learnt about in his early years with the Unitarian movement. And we carry on. Likewise, all the saints and sages of East and West, past and present, should be respected as spiritual forebears of the Kietsu Kyokai. Some may argue that this makes for too many scriptures and too many saints. But this is the same mistake as going to a cafeteria and thinking one must eat every single dish available. No matter how broad-minded the Kietsu Kyokai may be, it would never force someone to overeat. The only point the Kietsu Kyokai emphasizes is that one must not be a picky eater or a fussy eater. A lovely moment of humor, but I think with some real wisdom there. So I'll press pause here, unspotlight myself. We're going to go on to the next two essays where we get a clearer sense of what the Kietsu Kyokai then actually started to do in later years. But before we go on, anything people want to ask? Just unmute yourself or wave your hands or do something. Ooh, no questions. That's good. Okay, won't take long. And then we can devote the... Oh, George, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to comment that you brought out very well the project that he has, and I was thinking one way to see it a little better is to think of it as a chair with four legs.
Oh, yeah.
The problem of individuality, one becoming a free and creative person. And Imaoka Sensei would not tell anyone how to become that. He had no agenda for them, or they wouldn't be free. And so, one of the weaknesses that I've found in the interviews is he would not teach me about free religion. And so, uh, what came out of that was he sent me to find out from others what they had learned in the process of working with him. And I'll leave that alone because that's a huge area, and it only took me 300 and something pages in Cosmic Sage to trouble over that. So I'll leave that point. So individuality, and then the second thing that Andrew just brought out is the church, the local fellowship. And there's more to that kanji than you mentioned, because that kanji is Confucian. It's very old and it has a Confucian flavor to it, that it is also a school where you learn. And Imaoka was always say, uh, what have you learned this year? And you must be learning and growing and changing. And suddenly changing also is Buddhist. Well, anyway. And then the third leg is national. And Imaoka tried to bring together everyone in the Free Religious Association. And uh, he was successful for a while, but then American Unitarians came over to Japan and people were able to join IARF without first joining the Free Religious Association. Uh, Maruta-san will forgive me, but Risho Kosekai was invited straight in to IARF by Dana Greeley. They struck up a friendship. Uh, Risho Kosekai was invited in, and Risho Kosekai never had to process the idea of liberating or free Buddhism. And I had some wonderful discussions with founder Niwano about that, because Imaoka Sensei sent me to founder Niwano to find out what he understood about free religion. And then, of course, the fourth stage of the chair is the international. So individual, local, national, and then international, IARF, that we all join together of all the religious traditions, that there is the essence of free religion in every religion. And Imaoka Sensei was in love with Vivekananda. Behind Vivekananda is Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and so on. Anyway, I'm sorry, Andrew, but I just could hear so much going on in what you were saying that I couldn't keep my mouth shut. So
No,
I'll turn my mic off and maybe go to
no,
bed sometime.
no, don't do that. I
Talk
mean,
here.
I'm sort of. I think we all at the end. I'll jump to this point and remake it at the end. We are, in fact, extremely lucky. I think it's great that we have George, because George had that direct connection with, was a friend of, colleague, and knew for a number of years Imoka Sensei personally. And so we have this kind of direct line, and it's only through George's connection that I've been able to do what I've done. So, George, you are the living link. You're part of passing it on. So it's important to hear what you've got to say. Thank you.
You're teaching us with the eyes of someone who sees the fellowship And I was blind to so many things because I was focused on the individual. How did Imaoka Sensei become this liberated, sage human being? And anyway, I, I'll stop.
That's, no,
Thank you, Andrew,
thank you,
very
George. It's hugely helpful to hear these things. Thank you. Just so because George mentioned this Confucian thing, I'll just reshare what George was talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong. So remember, this is Kietsu Kyokai again. This is the Association Concordia, a secular organization. He replaced this Kyo with this Kyo, which was is a teaching. So Kietsu, it's a religious organization. But George is referring to this last one down here on the notice board of his church. This is used. This last Kyokai is used. This is the Confucian meaning of a yeah, is that right, George? This is what you're referring
yes.
to? Yeah. So he tried to do it through Japanese characters. We can't, it's very hard to do in English, but you can see, you can do it visually here, that it's a kyokai, but it's got this old resonance. If you knew the characters, one of the things that the editors, I think, did of his Japanese text, I'm sure in Imaoka Sensei's own manuscripts, this is how he's writing kyokai. But the editors in the book turn it back to this kyokai, which pulls it back to being, giving the sense of being a Christian church. But there's something going on here. And Maruta-san, maybe at the end you can help draw this out. Or a hand has gone up. Esther, do you want to say something?
Yeah, only a short remark. I should like to say that these are not Japanese characters, but Chinese
Yes,
characters originally,
correct.
modern and old ones.
Yeah, in it, absolutely. So there's the Japanese have these three alphabets.
Yeah.
Um, but they're, again, it's often in Japanese. The old Chinese kanji take on slightly different meanings in Japanese. So yes, yes, they are Chinese, but it's like when do they become Japanese? But your point, of course, is absolutely spot on that they're drawing on these old resonances. And that's one of the problems I am led to believe that a lot of modern Japanese readers reading Imaoka Sensei find it hard to read Imaoka Sensei because he's using so many old Chinese characters, these kanji, rather than the modern ones. So yeah. But what I love about these kanji and in this Japanese context is it's possible to show you that he had this different understanding of kyokai, but it's quite hard to talk about it in English. So maybe we can come back to that. Right, here we go. So now we're going to turn to the two final essays I want to consider today, namely that from 1979 called Reflections on and Prospects for the Japanese Free Religious Movement, and Kietsu's Faith from 1980. Both of these were summaries of Sunday meeting talks he gave at Kietsu Kyokai in 1979 and 1980. So when I talk about them as an essay, I'm imbibing them as a text off the page. But throughout this last bit, remember that all the quotes I'm going to use were also being addressed on a Sunday morning to the people who are in front of him at the meeting. Okay, that's important. They're not that yeah they were given live. But I particularly want to draw your attention to Imaoka's statement, Imaoka Sensei's statement you heard just a few moments ago, that he thought the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, despite its freedom, should nevertheless establish certain elements that are found in other more conventional and established religious communities. In other words, he saw that eventually its meetings would have to take on some kind of definite, distinct relatively stable, not stable so there's no change, but metastable, we might say, and recognizably free religious form. But as I'm sure you are all aware by now, nearly an hour into our meeting, just what an actual Kietsu Kyokai Sunday meeting was like, what its own religious practice was like, remains rather vague. And in these last two essays, combined with a few stills taken from some footage filmed by George in 1986, these things together help us catch a tiny glimpse of what that form was like towards the end of Imaoka Sensei's life. So importantly, what we learn from these late essays is that the community now has in place what Imaoka Sensei early called its minimal charter, a koryo, namely that set of foundational practical guiding principles found in the principles of living with which we began at the beginning of the meeting, and which were recited together at some point in the meeting. I don't know at what point, beginning, middle, end, I have no idea. And to kind of get us into the physical space and see what that was like, a bit anyway, I'm going to share some screenshots of the 1986 congregation, reading them together, and then I'll show you a few other pictures. This is from some footage, as I say, that George took. So here we go. Da, da, da. Right. So this is in the room of Seisuku Academy that was used as the Kietsu Kyokai's church. And what we see here is from the front of the room looking across at the congregation, and they are all reading something. I do not have absolute proof, and George, I don't think can absolutely remember what was going on at this point. How could you? A long time ago. But this is probably them reading out those principles of living. That's one side. Now we're moving round the room from left to right. You can see there are a few pictures on the wall. And here's the third one. And I think this fine-looking scholar here is George himself in the congregation. So that's them reading out the principles of living, I think. This is just to give you some, as I say, spatial awareness of what's going on. What you have here, this is Imaoka Sensei being led into the room by Amy, his daughter-in-law. You can see him entering the room. This is an indication that this is used as a classroom during the week. Here's a blackboard. Remember, it's part of the school. And just here, you can see one character, and it's written in the old Japanese style, i.e. from right to left. That's the old kanji for ki. It's a ki, and then you'll see there's an itsu. So he has kiitsu here. So this is him coming into the meeting. This is looking into the meeting from the same direction. This picture up here is a portrait of Imaoka Sensei from very early on. Now we're moving further into the room. You can see Imaoka Sensei on the left, and now you can see a bit more clearly Kiitsu returning to one. Imaoka Sensei being led to the top table with the congregation. Imaoka Sensei moving towards the top table. You can see some flowers there. And here he is sitting at the top table, Kiitsu to the left. And this is from where he gave his address or sermon or talk. There he is again. In the film, apparently he's delivering a lecture here on Emerson. And in the text, which if you please remind me to share with you at the very end, there is a summary of one of his sermons about Emerson's, or talk about Emerson. Here is from the other direction, looking into the room. You can see it's not very big. There's probably about 30 people there in total. From the back of the room. And this is afterwards. There were events afterwards. You can see them having a meal. This was a special joint meeting between the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship that was in Japan. And a couple of further pictures from the film, which I'll draw, the importance of which I'll draw out later. Here is Imaoka Sensei sitting with members of Kietsu Kyokai doing seiza sittings, quiet sitting, the meditation discipline he practiced through from 1910 onwards. And here's a picture of Imaoka Sensei without his glasses, sitting with another member of the congregation in seiza meditation. Right, there you go. So let's spotlight for everyone. So in addition to the shared reading of the Principles of Living, that's where we diverted into the building, we also know that each week there was a talk or sermon, and this was given, at least in the latter part of the church's life, this was given once a month by Imaoka Sensei, with other weeks being shared out to members of the congregation. Some of these talks, including the two I'm considering here and the one about Emerson, which I can share with you later, were reproduced in the church's magazine called, I'm never sure how to pronounce it, but Maharoba, which means a blessed or ideal land. That was the church magazine. We also know, although he does not explicitly tell us in any of these essays, that before the Sunday morning meeting, he held a separate meeting to practice seiza meditation, this quiet sitting, that he learnt directly from its first practitioner, Okada Torajiro, in 1910. As I mentioned, he practiced this daily throughout his life, and indeed he went so far as to say it was his only religious discipline. It's worth noting that this early morning meeting included attenders who were not themselves members of Kietsu Kyokai and who did not stay for the later meeting. On the occasion George Williams attended this seiza sitting, among the non-Kietsu Kyokai participants, he recognized a well-known Zen master and a Pure Land Buddhist priest. But apart from these minimal but nevertheless very important activities, the principles, a talk, and seiza beforehand, I can't be absolutely sure about the form of a regular Sunday morning meeting. So given this, I'd dearly love to hear from anyone who attended a Kietsu Kyokai meeting in the 70s and 80s. If you find someone, please, please, please get them to have a natter with me. However, despite my lack of knowledge about this, the following paragraphs from his 1979 essay, because it indicates those things he thinks are still missing from its Sunday gatherings. This gives us a sense that the Kietsu Kyokai's Sunday morning meetings were indeed pretty minimalistic in form and consisted primarily of these three things: the recitation of the principles, the talk, concluding with a question and answer session, I think, and then a time together to share some refreshment. So I'm going to quote this paragraph in full. It's not very long, and I'll intersperse my own comments about this. Quote, "The church should become more religious." Unquote. This implies he thought it wasn't religious enough. Quote, "I want something beyond mere talks and discussions, for example, music." Unquote. This implies the meeting mostly consisted of talks and discussion, lots of talking. So I think that's what that implies. Quote, music is important for religion. I would like to include music not only at the beginning, such as with Ho no Shinzan, that's a Buddhist song from the Jodo Shinshu Honganji-ha tradition, the one which he grew up in as a child, but also in the middle and towards the end, unquote. This implies there was no singing and no music. Quote, I think the talk should be about 30 to 40 minutes long, unquote. I don't know whether that implies the talks have got too long or were too short at this point, but he's clear that he thinks that's what it should be, 30 to 40 minutes. Quote, and it will be better to conclude with silent meditation or music and then hold the question and answer session afterwards, unquote. I think that's the final bit of that this implies there was no silent meditation in the Sunday morning service itself. It was beforehand. And that there was a question and answer session, but it came earlier in the service, perhaps immediately after the address or talk. So in addition to these missing things, Imaoka Sensei also indicates in the 1979 essay that other important aspects were still not in place that he thought would be required if Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai were to have a chance of becoming a thriving and successful free religious community. He writes, quote, if there are people who wish for it, I think it would also be good to hold reading groups, excuse me, to hold reading groups, peace movement activities, life counselling, legal counselling, and educational counselling on weekdays as well. I also think that wedding ceremonies and funerals should be conducted in a free religious style. If we can find appropriate individuals from among the church members to conduct them, wouldn't it be possible to arrange ceremonies that would not cost much, but which are fresh and new? And that would be well received. Unquote. So again, note that this seems to imply that there were not really special services such as weddings and funerals that were specific to Kietsu Kyokai. It was very much confined to a Sunday morning. Maybe we'll find some more information about that. But as I think can be told from these words, over 30 years after its founding, Imaoka Sensei is aware that the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai is still not functioning as a fully rounded free religious community, and consequently it's become, and becoming more so, extremely vulnerable. This feeling of vulnerability is clearly revealed by Imaoka Sensei in a number of ways in the 1979 essay. Firstly, he points to their building. As you saw from the pictures of the 1986 meeting, they're still in the original premises in Saisoku Academy. Imaoka Sensei tells us that this building had been completed in 1952 and had been paid for, in part, through the fundraising efforts of Kishimoto Hideyoshi, I can't say it now, Kishimoto Hideo, and financial support from, quote, a free religion group in America, unquote. He doesn't say which. However, he then notes that this was not sufficient, and consequently, quote, about half of the funds were provided by Seisuko Academy. The land was also part of the school grounds, and legally it was considered the property of Seisuko Academy, unquote. In other words, their building is not wholly their own. Secondly, some of you will remember from the last session that in 1949, under his principalship, the Board of Trustees of the Academy resolved to, quote, base all educational activities at the Academy on free religion, unquote. Given this fact, it's not surprising to discover that in its early years, the congregation drew much of its membership, and indeed much of its energy, from parents, teachers, and former pupils of the school. But after his final retirement from the academy in March 1973, it's increasingly clear that this connection is becoming increasingly tenuous. And painfully late in the day, it seems to me, in this 1979 essay, he's clearly realizing just how vulnerable this dependence upon the continuing goodwill of the Seisuko Academy has made the Kiitsu Kyokai. One gets the strong sense that, from the essays anyway, that Imaoka Sensei was realizing the church might not be able to depend upon continuing to use the building after he died. Not surprisingly, if my reading of this is correct, Imaoka Sensei then notes that the church's economic foundation is important for the future development of the future development of the church, future development of truth as well, I hope. And then it should consider getting its own church hall. But to be able to justify, let alone afford its own building, members are required. We all know that. We're all in small religious communities struggling in various ways. However, as Imaoka Sensei also admits, as he got older and headed towards retirement, and there began this inevitable slow disconnection from the daily life of the school, this fact, along with the increasing secularization of Japanese culture, resulted in a decline in membership and activities, which leads him to admit that he began to feel increasingly lonely as well as, quote, old and weak. In a rather poignant passage from the 1979 essay, he tells us, and remember this is also being addressed to the congregation, that from 1964, quote, the Sunday gatherings sometimes had only 3 or 5 people, and at times there were even days when I was the only one present. Compared to the lively activities of the first generation of predecessors from the Meiji and Taisho eras, I feel truly ashamed, unquote. Although there are more than 4 or 5 people in the pictures of the 1986 meeting I showed you earlier, about 30, but I think that was a specially arranged meeting. Maybe George can tell us a bit more about that later. Given that the church could no longer depend on members coming from the school, it was clearly necessary to think about gaining new members from Tokyo's general population. Not surprisingly, as he suggests this, he's adamant that this mustn't turn into any kind of coercive proselytization, but was something that should always be done in an educational and free religious manner. It was for this reason that he thought the community must ensure it maintained a sufficient understanding and deep conviction regarding free religion. And this was, of course, the main function of reciting the principles of living together each week and the weekly talk or sermon. Getting that basic understanding into the congregation. But. Remember Imaoka Sensei's earlier point about Kiitsu Kyokai needing to become more religious. Because the church didn't include, or appears not to have included, at least from my perspective, because the church didn't include within its services more feeling and emotionally orientated elements, such as meditation and music. Remember, the meditation, I think, was separate in the morning, and there was no music. My strong suspicion is that Imaoka Sensei, again very late in the day, was beginning to wake up to the fact that the Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai wasn't proving to be a very attractive religious option for new members. And without new members, there would be no new money, nor fundraising activities, nor any need for its own building. From my reading of the texts, and I could be wrong, so let's keep an eye open for people who were actually there, but from my reading of the text, it seems that towards the end of his life, Imaoka Sensei increasingly felt that the days of the Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai were numbered. But despite this, he never lost sight of the basic vision that had energized him throughout his long life. That this was so can be gleaned from the final paragraph of the 1980 essay, Kietsu's Faith, which he gave to the Sunday meeting that year, then aged 99. And I'll share that passage with you, so you can read along with me. I think it's rather lovely. So this is Kietsu's Faith from 1980. Right. Here we are. At any rate, humankind is a vast cosmic life force, which has grown and evolved endlessly from the depths of antiquity to the distant future. Since I too am one with this great life force, even though my individual physical existence has an end point, the life of my being, which is connected to the cosmic great life force, is eternal. In my daily life, I am entirely alone. I have no particular hobbies or amusements, and my days are exceedingly simple. However, because I believe that each and every day, each and every moment holds eternal meaning, I continue my personal efforts. Thus, I feel neither boredom nor loneliness. This is my life of Kietsu, my life of returning to oneness. The very last 3 years of Kietsu Kyokai, between 1986 and 1988, then disappear from the view of the written text from George's film. And so, at the moment anyway, these years also disappear from our view. To reiterate, I hope we find someone eventually who can tell us more. But what we do know, and with this I'll bring my talk to a close and we can carry on talking. But what we do know is that Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai did not survive long after Imaoka Sensei's death in 1988. It had become too dependent on Imaoka Sensei himself, there's an irony, and had not flowered and become the independent, thriving, free religious church, or Kyokai, he had long hoped for. So in one sense, along with the demise of the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, Imaoka Sensei's local free religious project, that's pointing back to George's really vital point about what we're about is, you know, the individual, the local, the national, the international. So there's a wobbly single leg here in Tokyo for a moment. So although in one sense, Imaoka Sensei's local free religious project can be said to have failed, in truth, that's actually not quite true. Because we are fortunate that through his essays and the personal friendship he had with George Williams, a living flame from his project has been passed on to us. It's here. And I think we can be grateful that we are now in a position to be able to learn as much from the project's failures as we can from its high ideals and visionary hopes. Failures are really important things to learn from. And in that sense, they become successful experiments in how to do it better the next time. There's that famous phrase, isn't there, by Beckett in Worstwood Hoe. Ever tried, ever failed? Try again, fail better. So we've got this wonderful opportunity. And to conclude, and taking into account both the failure and the vision, I would like to suggest, this is me talking now, so be aware of that. I would like to suggest that any modern form of free religion, any new Kietsu Kyokai returning to oneness fellowship, formed along the lines Imaoka sketched out for us in his last years, must be one which, from the start, pays careful attention in some fashion to all four of the religious or spiritual tendencies, samskaras, paths, margas, or disciplines, yogas, often referred to in the Hindu tradition. They are, you will remember, I'm sure, the intellectual, that's Jnana Yoga, the mystical, Raja Yoga, the devotional aspects, bhakti yoga, and the practical, karma yoga. To repurpose some of Imaoka Sensei's own words you heard earlier, it seems to me that any new Kietsu Kyokai must make it clear that it is not a picky eater who will only nurture and eat the fruit of the intellect, but that it now also nurtures and eats the fruits of the mystical, the devotional, and the practical. And with that thought, we now come to the moments when we can begin our time of conversation, during which, in addition to any further questions you may have for me, you can, should you wish, share how in your own traditions and contexts we are practicing or would like to practice free religion and free religious community. During this time, I am very happy to share with you some of the things we're doing in the Cambridge Unitarian community to make ourselves an explicitly free religious community. But I'll leave you to decide whether you want to hear any more about that as our conversation unfolds. That's it. Thank you. And over to you, to the conversation.
Andrew, if I can start, then thanks very much. And I think this, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it was really, really interesting. I slowly understand better why free religion is a religion, but I still find that difficult to understand, to be honest. But perhaps I'm hindered by my Christian roots to always think that religion is something of a belief in God or Jesus, where we talk perhaps here more about the original meaning of religion to rebind people. Perhaps that's a better understanding of the word religion. But what I wanted to ask you is, Andrew,
Yeah.
George mentioned that free religion has a liberative quality.
Yeah.
It can help you free yourself of addictions. Can you explain how that happens then?
Yeah, well, I sort of demur from saying I can explain. I can give a reading on my understanding rather than a definitive one. But yes, I've come across. Well, first of all, I've come across, and again, I can share it if people want. Just drop a note if you actually want to see this. But I found a section of text from a Zen writer, a Japanese Zen master, who was very insistent that the term jiyu in the Zen setting shouldn't be translated because it too easily translates simply to free, whereas it's got the quality of freeing, liberative. So it's much more an action. So I just wanted to make that point at the beginning. I think the way it attempts to create this freedom, this liberative quality, is because although it starts with the individual, its direction of travel is always from seeing that the individual is always reliant on something else, something that's constantly in motion, whether it's the motion or movement of the natural world or of societies or of people. So I think it helps us see the impossibility of hanging on to anything in this solid fashion. That actually static, fixed ideas, behaviors are illusory in the end, that there's always movement. But you can't do that on your own. In a way, you kind of need to do it through the process of meditation. Those of you who do mindful meditation will know part of it is about noticing that thoughts come and go. You accept that they're there and then you let them go. Again, it's this process. So it's a long process. It's not an instant one, Peter. It's not something you can come along to and be told A, B, C, D, and E, and you're saved. You're liberated. You have to engage in the process of liberation. But that it's always done in community, that it's always this conversational quality. that every time you go round the issue, it changes. You're changed by the conversation changes you. And that itself is a freeing dynamic. It's showing that the self, the others, and everything are constantly in motion. So I think it's the process of movement through an intellectual landscape, a spiritual landscape, and so on that does the freeing. It's not you. It is the process of being together in a community that's coming back to one. I hope that at least indicates something. Marie, do come back, Peter. Yeah, Marie, chip in, please.
Hello, good morning. Do you hear me?
We do.
Okay. Thank you very much for your interesting lecture. And I would be very interested to hear what you're practicing in your own parish and how you do that. And since I'm still only for half a year having my own parish, and if I still want to use something, I would like to ask if you can send me, or I don't know how, maybe the text of the principles and that letter text, but without all the Chinese characters, because if I want to discuss it with a group, I think it's too difficult to read for normal parishioners with all the, well, even for me, with all the Chinese characters. Do you have it?
Well, I do. I'm afraid at the moment, I can only share you the one with all of them. Just scribble them out. The reason for putting them there is because, just to explain that, and then I'll come to your point, is that I'm not a Japanese speaker. I mean, it's taken me a long time and hard work to try and do this. And I want to make sure as I do these, they are draft translations. I want to make sure that Japanese readers and speakers can see the Japanese terms. That's why there's so many of them. Having translated, with considerable help from technology and friends, having translated them, I want to be able to give an opportunity for Japanese speakers to say, Andrew, you know what? You've got that slightly or even very wrong. So I'm pretty confident they're close. I will be able to do that for you at some point, Marie, because George and I are hoping that when we've got these translations sorted out, the translation in English won't have them. But for the moment, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to leave them in. Just cross them out with black pen.
Yeah, I thought maybe you had it already. It's a little work to do it, but it's okay. But
right. Yeah.
It's very scientific, of course, that you put it in. But my parishioners probably don't mind so much.
No.
And they don't know Japanese, so
no. No, but the fun thing about this to some extent is if you copy the Japanese characters, you can put them into a Japanese dictionary, and that will help you understand some of the key things. But anyway, I will share the text before we go.
Okay.
You asked whether you wanted me to quickly share what we're doing in Cambridge. Do people want me to? I'll keep it hyper brief because you can follow it up yourself. Yeah. Okay. If you're happy with that, I'll do it very quickly. I'll just screen share a couple of things, and you can follow some of them up individually. So I won't hog the meeting. And also, please, please, please hear this. This is how we've tried to unfold it in Cambridge. It is not a blueprint. No one has to follow this, because free religion, whatever else it is, has to be, this is Imaoka Sensei's point, back to George's point, it has to emerge from the local context. We're a local Unitarian congregation in Cambridge, which has close links with India and Japan, because one of its early figures was a man called, who helped found the church, was Joseph Estlin Carpenter, who was an important early professor of world religions and was an expert in Pali and Sanskrit. And through some of those connections, we have strong links with India, particularly. the Indian liberal tradition, and through educational routes through Manchester College, we have some Japanese connections. So with the caveat that it's not a blueprint, I'll quickly share it. The first thing to note is that I've always been interested myself in free religion and what it would look like, but this goes way back, 20 years and more. I've been the minister in Cambridge for 25 years. So as a part of trying to develop that without a knowledge of Imaoka Sensei's work back in the early 2000s, I introduced in the evening, we didn't have an evening service, a service of mindful meditation that had a kind of liturgy, a mindful meditation, a time of sharing and conversation. That was always the evening service. The morning service was always the classic Protestant hymn sandwich of a liberal Christian flavour. Prayers, welcome, readings, Lord's Prayer, interspersed with hymns, sermon. Quickly, I took one of the hymns out and added a time of conversation after the address so people could agree, disagree. It wasn't a combative time. It was designed to help more conversation. Right. That carries on until the beginning of the pandemic. When the pandemic happens, the hymn sandwich type of service on Zoom, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many people, was a really awful Zoom experience. If you try to recreate that kind of service, it was just, whoa, it was awful. So I suggested to my congregation that what we did was move the evening service with its mindful meditation at the center and a liturgy, and I'll share that with you in a second, that's what we did during the morning service. So we moved that to Zoom up to the beginning. And so we started a practice of mindful meditation together. And it was also during this period that in 2019, George's book, Cosmic Sage, came out. And I was vaguely aware of Imaoka Sensei's work through, I knew, like many of you know, Dick Bokey, so who had some kind of connection. So I knew about him, but had no access to anything. George's book just, whoa! So I dived into that, and my interest there began to come into the conversation of the whole community, and we developed it from there. Right. When we came back from the pandemic, we discovered we had produced a service which included all those, it's quite by the local work, not my great insight. We produced a service that filled all those gaps that were in Imaoka Sensei's setting. So here we go. Let me share first of all. If I go to, sorry, just managed to close down my internet browser. That's much better. Now, so I'll be super fast, I promise. So here's the first thing. This is now our current web page. Front page. If you see here, we even have adopted, just as a little thing up here, Kietsu, returning to oneness. And the community together sat down and looked at the 8 principles and represented them in a slightly different way. These are not my words. This is the congregation, a group of 10 people from the congregation looking at the principles and seeing if we could articulate it ourselves. So the 8 principles became nurture, within this creative, inquiring, free and liberative religious gathering. We seek to nurture ourselves, desiring to grow into the most creative, sociable, compassionate and autonomous individuals we can be. Support our neighbours. In so doing, we remember that each individual we meet deserves the same love and respect as we do ourselves. Build a cooperative society. All the pictures, by the way, are from the local community. I am a photographer, so they come from my own collection. Build a cooperative society because all lives are intertwined. None of us exists in isolation. A cooperative society in which we find solidarity, fellowship and community lights the way for us all. find strength in community. This is inside the church. Our local gathering can be a microcosm of the cooperative society we seek to build. Here we support one another in our journeys, sharing our joys and sorrows as we work together towards a better world. Draw on insights from all creative, inquiring, free and liberative religions and philosophies, seeking to understand their essence and ideals and finding ways to apply these to the modern world in which we live. Care for the world around us, celebrating being part of nature, cherishing the beauty we witness and seeking to repair the damage and tread as lightly as we can. And then finally, affirm that there is no fundamental distinction between the sacred and the secular, and that all human activities, politics, the economy, education, art, labour, and even domestic affairs can be expression of free religion. Now, I start with that because we wanted to have a shared purpose. And so we worked through that process. So these statements and Imaoka's statements really do give us the basis from out of which we work, including the hiring of our buildings, by the way, I should add. But now to the practical, what it looks like. So down here, you can see the various things. We have the Sunday morning service of mindful meditation. I'm going to show you that. Principles of living, you've just read those. The Kietsu Kyoka, we actually have a member of this online meeting, and I'll come to that. And then there are the usual things, what's on, hiring our rooms, our history, me, selected writings and addresses, and contact us. Those are all fairly standard. But here's our morning service. Oh, yes, and that's really irritating that it does that. I'm going to stop share and open another browser because for some reason in Firefox, it doesn't show what we need to see. Cambridge Unitarian Sunday service of mindful meditation. Yeah, weird. Firefox just doesn't do it. Who knows why?
So
Okay.
I can see all this on your website, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it's freely downloadable. Steal it.
Yes.
So we called it the Mystery and Miracle of Life, and this is the service that we is this combining of our old evening mindful meditation with elements that we had from the morning service into this, what we would hope is a free religious connection. So we begin with a welcome, hi, opening words. It won't take long to mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge and community ever exceeding our practice. Reverently we meet together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. So it sets the scene. We have notices, celebrations, good things that have happened in the week. And the tradition. I always pick a date from the long history of liberal religion to mention there, to remind people we're in a procession of liberal religion. I think we don't pay enough attention to the genealogy of liberal religion. And Imaoka Sensei understood that. Remember, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Then we sing a hymn or song. Depends if we've got a pianist with us. Mostly we do. Then this liturgy, and remember, liturgy is, the etymology of liturgy is liturgia, so the work of the people. The lit bit is laos, the people. Ergia is work, from ergonomic, ergonomics and so on. So out of a community of diverse heritage and belief, these are the responses. We come together to share our hope and to create good in the world. The teachers of all traditions and times have taught that we are called to mercy, generosity, and mutual care, and that to be good is to serve. We know that there can be no enduring happiness for humanity so long as suffering and want go unrelieved, until all may be sheltered. None of us is truly at home. So may the power of our various faiths sustain us in this work, that we may be the hands of holy creativity, love, and justice, and together build a better world. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with nature, thus to be covenant with one another. We chose to use nature there. Those of you who know that will know that it often says God. We thought about God and nature, but actually we went with nature, this great life. Others may think. Then I light a candle. O light of life, be kindled again in our hearts as we meet together at this time to celebrate the joy of human community, seeking a wholeness that extends beyond ourselves. Then there's another responsive reading. And a planet is born, a spark ignites, something completely new comes into being. This is the creativity. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of life. A waterfall descends, a rainbow arcs through the sky, the ocean opens to an endless horizon. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of beauty. The stars pierce our hearts, peace envelops us, we are blessed. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of wonder. In the midst of pain, we find our way to hope and restoration. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of healing. In the midst of fear, we do what is right and speak our truth in faith. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of courage. In our aloneness, we see someone in greater need and offer ourselves to them. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of compassion. And we gather in community, in friendship, and cherish each other. We give thanks for the mystery and miracle of love. Now that moves slowly. I'm reading it quite quickly. Remember, it's got a prayerful quality. We do now understand, those of you who do martial arts will know that you have to practice your form repeatedly to get it in your body, so when you're actually out in the world, you do it naturally. This is part of this, I think, practice of getting this stuff deep into our bones each week. Then we have a time of led mindful meditation, 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
Immediately after that, in silence, people come up and then light candles of joy and concern for themselves, their family, friends, the world. It's a continuation really of the meditation, but it's really very moving, and surprisingly so, as we have a congregation of about 20 to 22 on a Sunday morning and about 10 online. That slow lighting of candles is, after the meditation, it's great. And then I say this: although we may often doubt that our prayers can change anything, let's never forget that our prayer changes people and people change things. May our prayers today so change us that we become the hands of holy creativity, love and justice in this our most beautiful but often bruised and hurting world. And we remember that we've lit these candles as symbols of our desire to heal and not to harm, to bless and not to curse, and to celebrate the mystery and miracle of life. Then there's a short address, 10 to 12 minutes, always goes online, is recorded as well. Then there's a piece of music. Because I'm a musician myself by profession, when there isn't a pianist, I can always provide that either on the guitar or the double bass. Then it opens to a time of conversation. And that often goes on for 10 or 12 minutes. We're right at the end, don't worry, we're nearly there. I won't read all of the rest of the prayers, you can do them. But I'm very keen to make it clear that it's not the speaker who is right or wrong, that this is it's part of a conversation. So we always finish that address bit with these shared words. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, begin to walk a path that is safer than the known way. And then we're into these final words. There's a prayer by Thich Nhat Hanh about the great compassion, a text from George de Benneville, the great universalist, which I read, John Morgan, friend of mine, universalist minister, that it's all the rest. And then this finishes with all the rest is discipline. But it's this discipline, I will finish with this discipline of making a whole self takes such a very long time. This is Peter, this is your point. I think, I'll go back to it, takes such a very long time. Pieces are not sequential, nor our supplies. We work here, then there, hold up tattered fabric to the light, sew past dark, intent, use all our thread. Sleeves may come before lengths, buttons before a rounded neck. We sew at what most needs us, and as it asks, as the world asks, sew again. The self is not one thing once made unaltered, not midnight task alone, not after other work. It is everything we come upon, make ours, all this fitting of what once was and has become. So it's this process of becoming a whole self. And then there's a final words, and then we finish with music. One final thing, if I go back to the top, there's another project, and Vince might want to talk about this. I'm not asking that you should, Vince, but should you be minded? We also started up during this time something called the Kiyotsu Kyokai. It's a Zoom meeting. And that is a very, very minimal form. What we do is this is Cambridge. We begin with the opening words, a short reading, some music. Sorry, we begin with 20 minutes of Seiza, light a candle, have some opening words. Someone gives a short presentation on free religion or in general, have some music. And then there's an hour of conversation. And we finish with some shared words and closing words again. And that's a midweek meditation conversation meeting as well that we have specifically called Kiyotsu Kyokai, because we are drawing. Why privilege the English? It's an international audience. We'll just use the Japanese term. So that's it. Those are the basic liturgies that we're trying to. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. I'll shut up. Any questions? Or thoughts of what you do? I'd love to hear what you're doing. Yeah, George, go for it.
I was thinking one thing that might help understand what Imaoka was working on and the problem he faced in free religion is two gigantic existential crises out of the 12 or 15 that are the major ones in human lives. One is freedom, and you can see a 2-year-old beginning the fight to be free. The terrible twos, if you have seen a child on that, trying to be free and demanding and then learning how to say no and all that, over against order and religion, religio, binding and ordering life. It seems to be an oxymoron to wed freedom and religion together. And yet, free religion is not a new religion. It's the essence of our potential to become human. And Imaoka would say he wasn't human yet. It was a category that he thought we could become when we are free and creative and unified with everything else, nature, others, and every one of us becoming free together. Back to Buddhism and the Bodhisattva who waits to become liberated, a Buddha, but waits to become free, or works for all of life to become free in a community. Anyway, like Peter said, it's very hard to understand. Oh, one other thing. 1970 is a very important date. Imaoka was a little depressed. He had just lost his wife in 1978. And so, yes, his essay in 1979 is not as hopeful as it would be a little later. He is 98 years old and still going. And I didn't meet him until the next year, 99, when he was 99 years old. And so and one other thing, I did interview the trustees of Seisoko High School, Seisoko Academy, where the meeting was and where he was the principal. And they promised that after Imaoka died, that the church, Kiyotsukai, could meet there. But then Imaoka's assistant died almost immediately after Imaoka did, and that promise was not kept. So those are the kind of events that occur from a historical point of view that look to the tragedies in a person's life. And finally, he didn't really try very hard to set up an institution that would survive. He had an ad hoc, as long as it's worthwhile, it will survive. And when it loses its worth, it won't. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I think your point, and just to add, because in showing you what's going on in Cambridge, remember, it's what I'm trying to point to there is not really our own what we're doing and saying you need to do something like that. It is to pick up on George's point, and in that sense, it's also to pick up on Peter's point, is that free religion, whatever it is, has to take a local form. It has to have some kind of structure. And that's what each of us are doing if we're in our ministry, back to you, Marie, perhaps, is it's trying to find something that's strong and stable enough to do the religio bit of free religion. So back to the point that free religion, when you hyphenate it, what that's really saying is that which frees us is that which binds us. And that's really what was trying to go on in the liturgy in Cambridge, is to show that which frees us is what's binding us and wanting to make us a local community. What will be fascinating, and I think is the case, is that will look different everywhere. It's going to take its local form. So that's why I'm saying, don't take what I've suggested as a model to copy exactly, but the kinds of things Imaoka Sensei was trying at the end, George, I think, I know I take your point that he was ad hoc, but clearly in those last essays, he is trying to encourage a structure to form of some description, conducting weddings, funerals, doing music. But how strong they are, how weak they are, I don't know. Other folk. Oh, yeah, George, chip in.
One thing to say is that free religion is not a new religion.
Yeah.
That is why it is really relevant for the International Association of Religious Freedom. It is the essence of each of our traditions to free and liberate people in communities, in our own communities, each one, Hindu, Buddhist, indigenous religions, and on and on. They each have the potential to liberate and to free. And from the point of view of psychology of religion, that means to address all of the 12 or 15 major existential crises and minister to those. So anyway, I'll get off my bandwagon.
It's a good bandwagon to be on, George. It's other folk, please. We've still got 10 minutes. Anyone else want to chip in? I'd value.
Yes.
Oh, who said yes?
Witzke.
Oh, Witzke. Hello, Witzke.
Sorry. Yeah, I was thinking you were talking about the way that Reverend Imaoka conducted his services, and you were questioning whether where the Q&A session would go. And I very much wonder if it wasn't at the beginning, because if it's in the style of a wisdom teacher, they would always start with the questions that people have. And that might be a very nice idea for all of us who are practicing free religion, actually. I haven't tried it ever in a service of mine, but I thought we could, maybe.
That's a great point. That's a really, really good. Yeah, I shall contemplate that further. I think my feeling is it would be unlikely uh, in Imaoka's setting, but that's a really interesting point. How in a kind of way, some of that goes on. I'm sure it'll be similar for those of us who are ministers here, because I tend to, well, I nearly always stand outside the church for the half hour, and there's a little gathering of people before the service starts. I'm saying hello. In a way, often lots of those sorts of things happen then. People kind of tell you what's going on and what's on their mind and what's happened in the week. But I hadn't really thought of it in the way you've just suggested, Vitska. Thank you. Yeah. Well, anyone else want to chip in? Oh, yes.
Is there something? Just
Yeah,
so.
Maruta-san. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for your liberating presentation of Imaoka Sensei, and I very much align with Dr. Williams' remarks. Now, I think that a new free religion is not a religion, but it's free religionness.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Free religiosity, religiosity, which is, I think, a free liberating life force, if you like. Just like Imaoka Sensei, the life force, cosmic life force, became manifest to Imaoka Sensei. So I think that free religion is not a religion, but a life force, liberated life force. It manifests each of us here, each of us here. For example, yourself, Reverend, Andrew or George Williams, or other people here. So I would like to respect free religion, respect free religiosity, free liberating life force, cosmic life force. So we are not producing, we are not creating a free religion, but free religion now talking to us, addressing us now. I think that's my way of thinking of free religion. Thank you.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I like that, free religionness. Yeah, and that's and I think you're completely correct on that point. This jiyu shukyo, free and liberating religion, is not, it's not in itself a thing. What Imaoka Sensei is struggling with is, if you can find jiyu shukyo in an existent religion and it fits you perfectly, then you can do it. And an existent established religion can be an expression of free religion. He absolutely gets that. His issue is not so much with that, because he was always concerned to encourage it. It's what do people like me, and I'll let you speak for yourself, who don't quite fit into the clothes of an established religion? What do we do? And that's, I think, what he was trying to do is form a community of people who were expressing jiyu shukyo, free religionness, but who couldn't quite wear the clothes of an established religion. It would be, what would that community look like? And then he has the paradox, which you hopefully I managed to bring out. Sorry, there was a lot of stuff. Is that the moment you do that, you kind of become a religion. And what a religion of people who are explicitly free religious people, jiyu shukyojin, what does that look like? And then that's when that free religious community made of free religious people who can't fit into established religion, that community is quite a tricky one. Yeah, Marie.
Yeah, in Holland we have a word vrijzinnigheid.
Oh, I like that.
And the word vrij is free, and that's usually used for those kind of religions. And in English you can only translate it in liberal, but liberal in Holland is also a political connotation. So vrijzinnigheid is especially for religions, and we have vrijzinnige people in Catholic churches, in other Protestant churches, and in our own remonstrant or free religious church, Unitarian church, say.
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you. That's yeah, and
I don't think you don't have the word in German, Freisinnigkeit or so. That's not so used so much, I think, or is it?
Yes, it is. It exists.
Yeah, but then you use.
But it's also a political term.
Yeah. One thing to, sorry, Marie, I jumped in.
No, okay.
One thing I would say is an important distinction to keep in mind here. Now you've mentioned liberal. Thank you for reminding us. The Japanese jiyu, in jiyu shukyo, can be used to and translated as liberal, right? But I think we need to be clear that liberal religions are not necessarily free religions. They can be religions that aren't free in terms of their willingness to constantly be changing. But they can be liberal. They can be very open-minded about other ways of being in the world, but they need not necessarily be themselves free religions. I'm grateful for any kind of liberal religion. Liberality of spirit is good. So I'm not making a pejorative, a negative distinction. But I think there's something distinctive about free religion is a kind of subset of liberal religion. Not all liberal religions are free. I would think and hope all free religions are liberal. And maybe there's something to tease out there. We're right at the end of our time. I have shared in the chat, if you want to download it now, there's a PDF file in the chat you can download, and that's my current best iteration of the essays that we've looked at in these two sessions, plus a few others. Please remember they are draft translations, especially Maruta-san. If you see in there, when you look at the Japanese, if you see some horrendous mistake, let me know. We're in the process of trying to get a good text. So that's there, and I have popped the two links up for the Cambridge Church. So we're right at the. Thank you for coming. I hope it's been of some interest and some use, not too long and dull. George, do you want to have the last word? Oh, thank you. There's a few hands clapping.
Andrew, thank you so much. It is now exactly 3 a.m. and I'm all through every second of it. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for attending. We hope to have many, many more classes going forward in the future, and maybe some of you will lead a class for the Institute for the Study of Free Religion in your tradition and for all of us. Again, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Much, Andrew, and you, George. Thanks very much, and have a good day.
A pleasure. It's lovely seeing you.
I'm going to have a good night.
Have a good night, George. Bye-bye.
What's left of it?
What's left of it, yeah. Okay, bye-bye, folks. Bye.
Goodbye.